So let's discuss some PUBG and wait a minute. You have the same shirt I do. You cannot wear the same shirt as me. Roman Reigns Superman Punch. And now it's time for another episode of Potato Aim Theater. Okay, so in all seriousness, let's take a look at PUBG on the Xbox One. And we're going to talk about the good and the bad. Unfortunately, most of the footage that I've gotten for this video is, well, fairly boring. And that'll actually come up in part of the bad, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I should note that PUBG has sold quite a bit of copies on the Xbox One. Last I heard, it was at like 3 million copies since its launch, and that was right around the new year. So we don't know how much better it's gotten since then. But in this video, we're going to take a look at the good and the bad for the Xbox One version, and if it can really improve much beyond what it already has. So one of the first things we should mention about PUBG is it's a very strategic game. It sits there and you can do, your typical run and gun if you're really good at it. But you can also do things like I did here and hide because you heard somebody coming and see if they come in, take them out, that sort of stuff. There's all sorts of different ways to play, and this is a good thing. It's not that there's only one style of play that will ever get you going and winning, or losing, for that matter. And this is a good thing that comes in just the way that PUBG is set up. It does work fairly well on both the PC and the Xbox in that respect. However, this doesn't mean that everything is honky-dory with the game. There are still a couple frame rate issues on the regular Xbox One and the Xbox One S, although the frame rate issues seem to have been ironed out on the X version, and it is hitting a pretty solid 30 frames per second for the most part, with only a few drops here and there. But there are some other things that come into play when you have to deal with the Xbox One and Xbox One S versions, and that is that the system just doesn't have the memory to deal with the loading in of assets and things like buildings, tables, stuff like that right away. As we'll see in this clip that I borrowed from my friend Mike, aka Monkey Nuke, on Mixer. He went into a building, and as you can see, stuff is loaded, but not everything's there. There's no tables, there's no chairs. You can see what's on the tables and chairs, but you can't necessarily see what's everywhere. And you can also, in some cases, it didn't happen in this clip, but in some cases on the Xbox One and the One S version, your buildings will look like giant globs of clay with like just colors on them, and then they'll load in a few seconds after you land. And this is an issue that the X version does not have, which gives X players a slight advantage over base unit or S players as well. Another major problem with the game, and this is something that still happens on the PC as well, is lag and rubber banding. As we're going to see in this little clip, I end up getting killed mostly because of lag, partially because of my own inability to punch the dude. But you're going to watch as I get network lag detected, and all of a sudden he flies ahead of me, and then he's right on top of me and punches me to death. And this is something that happens, as I said, both on the PC and the Xbox One versions, and it's really, really annoying. Their servers have been crap for quite a while.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
These issues do tend to iron themselves out as the game progresses, most likely because there's just less players, so there's less server utilization. But they do happen, and they happen quite often enough that it's super annoying, especially the rubber banding. The rubber banding, especially in the early game, is just so horrendous. You're just like, oh my god, just please stop. But hopefully they'll get better servers, and we'll, eventually get them off to where they are supposed to be. Another issue that can really pop up is what was known as the mid game. This is where you are between, say, 60 to 40 players, and you're kind of outside of the main zones, depending on where you landed. Obviously, this can be different if you land in a more popular area that happens to be in the play zone as the game goes on, or if you decide to land in a more isolated area to try to loot up without too many people getting on top of you. But the mid game is fairly boring. As you can see in this clip, I'm just running, trying to get to the safe zone, because where I landed was actually really far away. And this has something to do with the size of the map. It's a very big map, and if you don't have a vehicle, getting into the play zone can be pretty hard if you're really far away. And, as you can see, I took some energy drinks so I get some health regen, because I'm now in the blue, as they call it, and taking damage. I'm also in the red zone, and somehow I run through the entire red zone and don't die, so there's that. But yeah, the mid game is fairly boring in a lot of cases. You barely see anybody, and thus you don't get into fights, or even you don't get to jump on somebody who happens to be doing something else. Now, I should note that in the PC version, they are changing some things with how the blue zones work to potentially get the mid game to work just a little bit better. I don't know exactly how well it's going to work, but if I remember right, they said they're going to decrease the speed at which the earlier circles move in, and then increase the speed at which the later circles move in, to try to get people in the late game to really clump together and have to fight each other. So we're going to have to see exactly what goes on with that. But right now, yeah, the mid game can be pretty boring, especially in a solo match, or even in squad matches. It can be that way too. So here's hoping that maybe, I already know that the desert map is actually bigger than this current map, but here's hoping like maybe the next map will actually be a little bit smaller, and we'll be able to see more action as we go along. Now, it might sound like I'm being a bit harsh on the game, but in truth, the game is actually really, really fun to play, and that's a very good thing. You can sit there and just keep playing over and over, and you'll literally be like, just one more game, just one more game, just one more game. And the next thing you know, it's like 3 in the morning. You're like, oh my God, I got to be up for work in 2 hours. So, there's a little bit of a danger there, but it's very fun to play either by yourself or with friends. And I'm not going to fault them, too much on some of the things that they can improve on. Like I said, they could make a map that's a little bit smaller, maybe 3/4 the size, half the size of the current 2 maps. Well, the second map isn't on the Xbox version yet, but that would be a big help. It's something Fortnite does with a much smaller map, so you just have more opportunities to be in battle, and it works out pretty well there. Another thing is they've been very good about updating the game. They actually, this past week, they did 2 updates, as a matter of fact. They did one update, and then some people discovered that there was an exploit that you could do where you could do something on the loading island and then end up not getting in the plane, and then you would just stay there and you would win the game because the blue storm wouldn't affect you on that island. Whereas it would eventually get to a point where there's no safe zone on the island and the other people would die. Pretty shitty thing, but they immediately in the next couple days put out a new update that fixed that exploit, but that also added in a new control scheme for Xbox One players, which was a nice thing. It was something people were asking, because the original control scheme is tap left trigger to aim down sights and hold left trigger to like do a third person aim, which didn't always work out too well depending on the weapon you had. And now they changed it so you can have it to hold left trigger to aim down sights, or you hold left bumper to do the third person aim. And this was a good thing. And they have been very good about doing the updates. They've been working really hard about getting these updates out, and I have to commend them on that. You know, it's one of those things. The game has so much potential, both on the PC and the Xbox One. And it really is just going to come down to if Bluehole or PUBG Corporation, the actual people who develop it now, can really improve the game overall in a lot of different ways. It's going to require more maps. It's going to require some maps that are smaller than others. It's going to require trying to work it so that the mid-game isn't quite so boring, where, you know, you actually will find people or risk being found yourself, that sort of stuff. And in the end, I really think that they could do quite a bit with this game. It's got that fun factor, it really does. Whether you're playing solo or you're playing with friends, it's so much fun. And I understand why it became so popular on the PC and why it is so popular on the Xbox so far.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. If you liked it, please hit the like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike button. Either way, I'm good. Also, if you enjoyed the video and wish to help support in making more, consider visiting my Patreon page located in the description below. And again, thank you very much.